Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, I hope you all can see my screen and you can hear me. I'm going to reduce the zoom size here a little bit, just to make sure I cover the full thing in a little too small, maybe 90. I have to scroll back and forth. Okay. So welcome everybody. It's 5:06. I think we can get started. More people might join in later. So for today's class, we are going a little bit off our scheduled plan, but I think it's an important discussion to understand the role of gender as described in Vedic scriptures. And, as we go through different purports within Bhagavad Gita, we come across different references and related to gender and assigned roles. But, if we don't have a solid background or a fundamental understanding of what the Vedic perspective is on these matters, then we cannot fully appreciate it. So in order to make the most out of the purports, I think it's worthwhile to have this session. And looks like there was some interest based on the conversation that we had offline. And so I put some notes together. It was really very quick, so I don't have a nice PowerPoint presentation or any content, but just so that I don't waver in my thoughts, I just wanted to put some structure. So I have scribbled some notes over here and then just like talking points for me and try to put some structure to this. And hopefully, I think we should be able to cover all the content in today's session. If not, I don't mind continuing the discussion in the next session. So having said that, the scope for today's discussion is we will take a simple case of gender roles, and we will try to understand it from the perspective of pristine Vedic culture. And some of the points that we would address is basically what are the prescribed norms based on gender. Why are they prescribed in the way they are prescribed? And the why question will basically help us answer the essence. What is the essence of these prescriptions? Because sometimes we just, because of culture or tradition, and we might have heard things, or but if we don't understand the essence of it, then we cannot appreciate it. And also, once we understand the essence, then we can apply in the essence in situations which are not ideal, right? So somebody might say, well, the times have changed, and so how is it relevant in the present context? Well, if we just go by the word of the rule or the prescription without understanding the intent, then that would turn into a misapplication. But if we really understand the intent, the prescription, the essence of the prescription, then we can apply it into any situation. So I think I do want to spend some time just trying to understand what that essence is. And I just say time permitting in case we run out of time, but in case we do, then we will definitely cover it in the next class, so that's not a problem. What is out of scope is how, if we say that, well, this was the original culture, and obviously everything is subject to degradation, so then how actually the degradation happened, it's not something that we would cover in today's session. I mean, it's another interesting topic, maybe some point in future, but it's not directly relevant. I think what we are just trying to do right now is understand the essence of the prescriptions. Having said that, so what are we further going to focus on? So we have this, I'm just trying to present things in the terms of the contemporary parlance of terminology that we use. So this idea of sex that is assigned at the time of birth, and then there is gender identity, and sometimes they don't match because somebody is assigned sex of male or female at the time of birth, but then as they grow, they might realize that their identity is different, right? And then if that identity is different, then if they're not comfortable expressing the true identity, then they might still express their identity in terms of their behavior, or specifically how they dress, in terms of whatever that assigned sex is at the time of birth. But for this discussion, we're just going to make it simple. As I said, we just want to analyze a simple case before anything complex that can be built on top of it. So we're just going to talk based on what is called cisgender. That means the gender is same as the sex that is assigned at the time of birth, right? And only binary. So there's the idea of this non-binary gender also, and that is something it's always been there, and it's known. You will see references of that in the Vedic scriptures. So here's a quote from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 29th chapter and 29th verse. It says, "Kvachit puman, kvachit cha stri, kvachin no bhayam andhadhi, devo manushya striyagva yatha karma gunam bhavaha." So kvachit puman means sometimes the soul assumes a male body. Puman, it's a male body. And sometimes kvachit cha stri, so sometimes the soul assumes a female body. Kvachin na ubhayam. So no bhyam, you can break it down into two words, na and ubhayam. So na means neither. Sometimes the soul, it occupies a body that is neuter. It's neither male nor female. And ubhayam means both. And sometimes it occupies a body which is both male and female. What is technically called a hermaphrodite, or like a she-male. And in some orthodox cultures, they only accept the binary gender, and the other genders, they are looked down upon. But according to Bhagavatam, what it's saying, well, these are all different kinds of coverings of ignorance. So andhadhi, so the intelligence is covered by ignorance, because ultimately body represents ignorance, right? It covers our spiritual identity. So it doesn't matter if it's a male body, female body, or both, or neither, or any combination between the four, right? So these are just the cardinal points which are mentioned, but it could be much more complex than that. But in either case, they are all coverings of ignorance. So There's different kind of genders, they are accepted and they're well known. So it's very, just in two lines or half a verse, this is described very nicely over here. Similarly, one might assume a body of, so this genders, again, it's not, you find these genders is not just limited to the human species of life. We find them in Devo, which is demigods, Manushyas, the humans, and Triyag is basically the animal species of life. And so similar, so these genders are manifested across different species. And then Yatha Karma Gunan Bhava. So according to their past karma, different kind of bodies are assumed. And I've just presented a little graphical description of, if you have to represent gender on in a graphical way. So you can see this is on the y-axis you're female, on the x-axis you're male. So, this is the green dots represent the binary gender. Like, if you think of it in terms of distribution, like, most people would be around over here or here, either male, female, but then there are other different combinations also, like this axis you see both male, female, and then you have neuter gender as well. What we are not going to cover in today's session is sexual orientation. I think that's a completely different topic in itself. So having said that, this would be the scope for our discussion, and I think we can dive into the further discussion on it. I just want to make some housekeeping notes. There is a lot of content to cover, and if you feel like I'm going a little fast, then tell me to slow down, please. I think I don't want to rush through this, but and so that's why it's important. If you think that this is going too fast, then ask me to slow down. Also, if you have any questions at any point in time, please interrupt me, please ask me. And then I think it's better to get the doubts clarified at that point in time. And there's a logical sequence to the content that I put together. And so I think it's very, very important that you follow as I cover the content. I hope that is clear to everyone. So yeah, let's go into the discussion right itself. So first of all, I'm going to start a discussion explaining social structures. And if you think of any society, regardless of what kind of principles or norms or values that they follow, it is a social structure, right? And everything is organized around achieving those values. And what I mean by that is, well, you could have economic ideologies, which means you could have a capitalist system or a communist system. And then, based on that particular ideology, well, you want to maximize or try to achieve that highest form of value that the society is trying to achieve. And then everything is organized around that. So in a capitalist society, I think, there are very liberal rules around purchase of property or, ability to start a business. Similarly, communism have their own ideals. So there is a structure and there are systems, there are processes. And the analogy that I would like to give is in terms of, it's not very different from the social model is, in a way very similar to like statistical models. And for this, you don't need to be an expert in statistics, but I'll give you some, simple examples. Like in any kind of data modeling that we do, so like the data is distributed if you take on a graph, right? So your x-axis and y-axis, and you see a scatter plot of different values over here. And the idea of statistical model fitting is that you try to fit a curve. And the idea is that, well, there's a variability in data, and if you try to fit a line, and that line could also be used for prediction, and you basically slice the data and you model that line in terms of the value that is most important to you. For instance, I'm giving an example like a bank. When you go to a bank and want to get a loan, well, the bank looks at the credit score, but the higher the credit score, the less the chance of that person defaulting. But how does it determine the credit score? The credit score is the value that is determined based on so many different attributes, right? You can look at your socioeconomic factors, your length of employment, and other kind of debts that you might have. And based on all these parameters, they might plot a line and they say, well, whoever is on that blue line, those individuals, we feel confident that they won't default and they would be able to pay the loan. And there is a different ways you can fit the curve. As you can see, it's the same dots, the same orange dots in all the three options, but one could be a very simple straight line. And this is called underfitting. And underfitting basically means is that you leave out a lot of values. So you would say that, hey, this orange dot down here is not on the blue line. And you would say, well, this individual is, has a likelihood of defaulting on a loan. So I would rather not give the loan to this individual or have very high interest rate and things like that. Now, what it might be the case that, this particular individual over here actually is falsely rejected, in the sense that, is perfectly capable of repaying the loan, but is an underfitting means we missed out a lot of people, which we should not have missed out, right? Similarly, there is this idea of overfitting. In the overfitting, what it does is that it tries to model every single point or most of the points on the distribution. And so what happens is, in the same example, this individual over here, which he should have been rejected because it really has a bad credit history and it's very likely that it's going to default. But because the graph is trying to cover that point, what happens is that person is included, and then it's a false positive, meaning that, well, he was identified as a good what do you call it? Someone with has the good ability to repay the loan, but actually it's not the case. That person would default. And so a good model is basically, it does not underfit, neither it overfits, right? And there's a balance model. So if you see, actually there's a curve over here, right? And so you don't want to include every single data point, but then you want to include a good good amount of representation of what the reality is. And so social structures are also like that, and I'll elaborate a little bit in terms of what it means. So what would be the analogy, if we have to relate to social models which relate to underfitting, overfitting, or balanced structures? So a lot of faith-based societies, they are very myopic in their view, and they try to reject a lot of individuals, and like they have this idea, it's very simplistic, my way highway kind of thing. Same with political and economic ideologies. So for instance, political ideology, well, you say, well, democracy is the highest form of governance, and then whoever is not following democracy, they are looked down upon, and without even having a fair consideration of their worldview, they are just rejected, and sometimes they are forcefully liberated. Like you see some countries in the Middle East where like Iraq is a good example, right? Hey, okay, he's a bad Saddam Hussein was a dictator, maybe he was not good for what do you call these, the way he was ruling, it was very autocratic, right? But then the country in the West, they felt that was their duty to liberate them. What did they do, right? They just went and bombed that country and tried to liberate them. But if you see, the country is a bigger mess than what it was during the rule of Saddam Hussein, right? So it's even worse. So similarly, economic ideologies, there is the idea of, well, communism, you have to follow communism. If you don't follow communism, you're considered subhuman. And same thing with the capitalists, they think, their ideology is greatest. So that's why there was this Cold War until the Soviet Union collapsed. And because there was this clash of ideas. Same thing with faith-based societies, like you look at either Abrahamic or Eastern faiths. So in the Christian theology, well, they have the idea that, well, if you believe Jesus, and then they appreciate that, but everyone else, they are called pagans, right? They are outright rejected. And in Islam, they have a similar concept where either you are a Muslim or you are a kafir. And the Hindus also, they have similar idea where in a way Hindu idea is even more extreme, in the sense that one can become Christian or one can become a Muslim by adapting that religion. But the Hindus, they have this idea that, well, you're either born a Hindu or you're not a Hindu. So like you go to some temples in India, like especially Jagannath Puri temple, they wouldn't even allow anyone to enter who doesn't look like Indian, right? It doesn't matter that person is a theist or atheist, but you have to be born Hindu, right? So these are underfitted social structures where very limited myopic view, and they leave out a lot of individuals. Now, overfitted social structures are the other extreme. So the first one that I mentioned about was, you can say, like people on the far right, and then people who are on the far left. They have the liberal humanistic societies. Those are, you can think of them as an overfitted social structures. And what they try to do is they try to model in every single idiosyncrasies that you find out there, and so that's what far left is. To give an example, like out here on the West Coast, we are the bastion of liberalism, and it's very liberal leaning states. And then you see sometimes even like the Antifa movement, which is going on right now, which you can see it's on the far left, but there are people who are proponents of it. They want to include that. Similarly, the idea that the human life is the most important, but not in the sense that we understand from the perspective of Bhagavad Gita, but the idea that humans have a unique position, and they are meant to enjoy even at the expense of other species of life. And so that's why there's so much animal slaughter going on. As long as you don't harm other humans, it's perfectly fine. But all the animals are exploited. And that is taken to the other extreme, where like, hey, even capital punishment should be abolished. Well, no matter how horrible crime that individual has done, but that individual should be pardoned. So you see, there are extreme is another extremity on the far left, and where they want to allow and model in all kind of individuals, right? So that's, you can think of that as an overfitting. And in the overfitting, what happens is you're not trying to model any particular trait, like as opposed to either the faith-based societies or politics. They have an ideology where, well, they think this is, if you have this attribute, you're accepted, otherwise you're completely rejected. In overfitted social structures, what they do is they're not necessarily trying to model something, just want to include everyone, right? And it doesn't matter what your view is. The only exception is, well, if you don't agree with the far left opinion, then you are then they don't let you in, but otherwise everyone else is accepted. So anyway, I just want to give that perspective. But and then there is the idea of Varnasrama society, which is is misunderstood a lot. People think it as same as a caste system, which is actually quite different. And we'll see in this presentation, how Varnashram is kind of a balanced model. Now, despite of the fact that Varnashram is a balanced social structure, it is still faulty. And I'll go back to stats again. So if you go back to your stats 101 class, you might recall, first thing that they teach you is that all models are wrong, some are useful. If you recall that, or if you have not studied statistics, that's okay. But what they say is that if you look at even the balanced model, why is it wrong? Because it's still missing out certain points, right? It's not including every single attribute. Even the overfitted models, they are going to miss out some, or the very fact that they are overfitting is going to lead to other kind of problems. You are incorporating bad elements which should have been rejected. So in either way, all models are wrong, right? But some are useful. And the same thing applies to the social systems also. So all social systems are faulty, but some are useful. And so Krishna actually acknowledges this in Bhagavad Gita, and we'll talk about that. But when it talks about the utility, so if it's faulty, how it's useful. So Varnashram might have its own faults, but the utility is that it is still good enough for us to transcend the repeated cycle of birth and death and get out of this material world. And so for that, Varnashram is very ideal kind of social structure. So what is the context? In what context is Krishna saying that all social systems are faulty? Well, in the it's in the 18th chapter, 48th verse. He says, "Sahajam karma kaunteya sadosham api na tyajet sarvarambhi doshena dhumen agni iva avritaha." So this last two lines are especially very famous. In this, Krishna is actually alluding to Arjuna. So after speaking the entire Bhagavad Gita, this is the 18th chapter, is the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He is alluding to Arjuna that, okay, now I've told you everything, and now he's coming back to the, the original arguments of Arjuna. He's saying that, if you think that the execution of Kshatriya dharma is faulty, because why is it faulty? If you think, he's saying, you might think that, well, it might be liberating to me because I'm doing my duties according to my nature, but in the course of execution of my duty, I have to kill my relatives. So, you can say that it's a fault. So such a fault is actually inevitable in the process of execution of any prescribed duties. But the process itself is liberating. So it's the example that is given here. The verse actually, what it literally says, that every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born of his nature, O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of faults. Right? So when we talk about fire, like fire here is in terms of a desirable element, because fire provides us heat and light. So when it's dark, we need light. Fire is there to provide us light. And fire provides heat when it's cold. You can use that heat even for cooking, right? And in order to keep our bodies warm. But as soon as there is fire, there is smoke. Well, you might say that, I go to my cooking gas range and I turn it on and there's no smoke. It's just that the smoke has been removed further upstream, in the sense that how is the gas produced, the propane or butane, whatever is used, it's has to undergo a petrochemical refinement, right? Distillation. There's a multi-stage refinement that happens. So if you go to a refinery, you will see all the pollutants coming out. So it's just that they have removed the pollutants further upstream. That's why you don't see those pollutants in your home. But the fact is that wherever there is fire, there is smoke. The fire is desirable, smoke is not desirable. So Krishna is saying that similarly, so by this analogy, he's telling Arjuna that, okay, there's no social system that is without faults. All systems are faulty. But then you have to choose one that is going to serve the purpose. And then how do you decide the purpose, right? So in the Varnashram worldview, the idea is that, well, no matter how much material conveniences we are able to arrange, it's all temporary. Right? Ultimately, it will end when the body ends. And even during our attempts to enjoy it, it is subject to so many difficulties. There's so much difficulty in making arrangements to counter the miseries and maintaining those arrangements. And so there's a lot of different challenges. And even when we have those arrangements, we are fearful that we might lose it. And so he's saying that we have to choose our battles. We have to, when we are trying to model our desired attribute, right, that we have to choose it right. So instead of the contemporary world where we are just trying to model maximize our material conveniences, the objective of Varnashram is different. And so the current social structure is based on maximizing our material comforts. The Varnashram social structure is saying that, well, what we really need to model is we have to reduce our karmic debt, and we have to arrange our social system in that way, and then with the ultimate objective of getting liberated. And so that's why Krishna is saying essentially what the statistician realized, it's something that all knowledge is always there. It's just that they realized it at the time. So, same analogy can be applied and to the social system. So they are all faulty, including the Varnashram system. But the Varnashram system is useful in the sense that it serves a purpose. So is that point clear to everyone so far? Any questions? Okay. This point, I think we have covered. The next point covered many times. I won't spend too much time. I just briefly mentioned that, in the Varnashram social structure, the desired trait of acting as per one's own nature is modeled, since it is favorable for liberation. What it means, I gave this example many times, like Bhagavatam mentioned that a carnivore does not accrue any karma for killing its prey. Similarly, an insane man who commits a crime right? Then the court generally, if you prove that this person was insane and because of his insanity murdered, or that that individual is acquitted, is pardoned. So you cannot expect that person to have any discrimination, and they might restrain that individual so that they don't do further harm, but he doesn't go through a punishment. Similarly, the work that is done as per our nature, we are impelled by our nature. We don't accrue any karma. And so this is the underlying principle of the Varnashram society. And I just wanted to reiterate that because in the further discussion we sort of based on that. There is another benefit of this, that such a society is resilient to collapse. Now, this is not very relevant to today's discussion, so I don't want to spend too much time. But the idea is that if I think I mentioned in one of my previous classes that if we are motivated by material remuneration, and initially everyone is, but what happens is, because of the law of diminishing returns, unless I get a higher remuneration every successive year, my motivation to perform the same job reduces. Either I have to get promotion, or some sort of increase in salary or recognition to keep me motivated just to keep on doing the same job. But when this aligns actually with one's nature, then what happens is, initially everyone is motivated by material remuneration, but what happens is, because of law of diminishing returns, that allurement of that material remuneration goes away. But the fact that, because that engagement is based on our nature, we'll keep on doing it. And so eventually, if this system is not able to support the same amount of remuneration, or systems collapse, the society does not collapse. And then that's why Varnashram society had been going on for millions of years. So that's just a side note. And so in this regard, Krishna mentioned in Bhagavad Gita twice that it's important that one engages in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, then to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. And this is mentioned twice in Bhagavad Gita, right? So there is 1847 where it is mentioned, and then again in 335 is also mentioned. See, it is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faulty, than to perform another's duties perfectly. The second line is slightly different, but has the same essence. So the first one is saying that duties prescribed according to one's nature are not afflicted to sinful reactions. So the whole idea is not in the exchange of my duty how much remuneration I would get, but the fact that you want to engage in duties, you don't accrue sin. And the example that is given is that, well, the Vaishyas, in the course of their action, sometimes they have to lie, because in business, if you don't lie, then you cannot run a business. So it's acceptable for them. It's they're by their nature, they are forced to engage in activities related to trade and business, and then in the due course, whatever imperfections that might come about, just like fire is accompanied by smoke, that is not taken into account. Similarly, Kshatriyas, they have to engage in diplomacy. Sometimes they are engaged in killing of animals also, because some of the war is not going on, but they are allowed to do hunting. Otherwise, they cannot keep their skills very sharp, to be able to use weapons, and should be accustomed to seeing blood. But it is otherwise that act is sinful. But Kshatriya, they are given that excuse. Similarly, Brahmanas, in course of performing different fire sacrifices, there are sometimes a lot of different insects and other animals that are also killed and affected. And so any kind of work that we do, there's always some kind of in the course of execution of our duty, there's always some kind of side effects, or undesired outcomes or byproducts. But if that action is according to our nature, it's not subject to sinful reaction. And that is the essence of it. Similarly, in the other words, Krishna is saying, well, destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duty, for to follow another path is dangerous. And what it means by danger is that the greatest danger is that this rare human form of life that we have achieved, one might, if you don't make the best use out of it, you might degrade into lower species of life, having accrued sinful reactions. And so so rather than degrade into lower species of life, we might be apparently unsuccessful in the course of executing our duties from an external perspective. And that's why it's saying destruction in the course of performing one's own duties better. But why? Because, like say example of Kshatriya, if they, even if they lose, or they're killed in a battle, like that's the best thing that could happen. So they got destroyed, literally they lost their life. But because they lost their life in the execution of their duty, and Kshatriyas who die in a battle, they are immediately elevated to heavenly planets. So they are destined to have a better destination. And so it's very relevant in the context of Arjuna. So this is the essence of the injunctions. Is that clear? Now I think we'll dive right into our subject of discussion. So I think this should be clear. I think we've discussed many times, but if it's not, you can bring it up right now. Okay, so the Varnashram system, the whole idea is it wants to enable its the individuals or the members of the society to realize Satta Chit Anand, right? So which is our original form, which is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss, and that's the objective. And all the training that we go over here is actually for us to be eligible and to have that mental grit and psyche to be able to achieve the spiritual world and then live over there. So we have to have a liking for it also. So there are three aspects of it. So we discussed this in the past. Sat, Chit, and Anand. The Sat means eternality, and right now our existence is not eternal in the sense that the false identity that we have assumed of our body, which is subject to repeated death, and you get another identity, and that identity is again subject to death. And so what happens is, first of all, by engaging everyone according to their prescribed duties, which are not contrary to one's nature, people in general, they reduce their karmic debt. They don't have karmic entanglement, and which is the primary cause for being engaged in repeated birth and death. And so that's the first thing we want to stop. By the way, I think I forgot to mention an important point earlier, which was why is the, I forgot. I wanted to make a point that the Varnashram society is a balanced society because you are free from karmic entanglements by execution of prescribed duties, not contrary to one's nature. What was the point? I had just recalled it point a second ago, and again I forgot. Okay, you'll come back to me. I'll mention that. So the idea is that if we look at our existence, we get into the tendency of proving that we are capable of doing something, right? And we see that example again and again in all the ages. The example of Eklavya, for instance, right? So he was a son of a hunter, and for a good hunter should be a good marksman. In case of Eklavya, he was an exceptionally good marksman, right? And though he was a good marksman, he had the skills to be able to use bow and arrow in a very expert way. But that skill in itself does not qualify him to be a Kshatriya, because skills can be taught to anyone. And there is a difference between skills and the nature. Now what happens is because we have this false ego, we always want to prove that I'm capable of doing this, right? And yeah, by training, anyone can be capable of doing everything, but instead of falling into the trap of trying to prove that I can do something, we should rather use this rare human life to engage according to our nature, as Krishna is saying, right, in those two verses that we just discussed, and try to reduce our karmic debt. So that's why the Vedic, the Varnashram society encourages its members to engage in activities according to their natures. That is the first point. The second point is when you talk about chit or knowledge, so the Brahman realization is one attains eternality in the sense that they, if you stop karmic the cycle of karmic reactions, then you're liberated from that entanglement. But still, the further knowledge is not there. What is that knowledge? Knowledge is that of Paramatma realization, that beyond the Brahman there is Paramatma, or someone that is superior to Atma. So that's what Paramatma literally means. And in that, then it means that one has to accept a higher authority, right? And that's the logical conclusion of it. And which means to accept that hierarchy or authority while still being engaged in the nature. The first thing is we have to be engaged according to the nature, and within that engagement, we want to accept an authority of someone who is superior to us. And superior not in terms of material terms, but what is the whole purpose? You want to achieve spiritual perfection, then we have to accept the authority of someone who is spiritually superior to us. And but the conditioned soul, having fallen into this material world, is the tendency is that it does not want to accept any kind of authority, right? And so the other purpose of Varnashram society is to train ourselves to in the sense that we have to learn how to accept authority of someone who is spiritually superior to us. If you accept the authority of someone who is a rascal, a nonsense person, then that does not help. So we have to be careful whose authority we accept. But it is extremely important to have that kind of training, and so there's a lot of focus on that as well. So the ethos of our contemporary existence is to be a self-rugged individual, right? The whole idea of the American exceptionalism is especially is to be a self-rugged individual who can rise up to all the challenges and hindrances. And then the general idea of defying any kind of authority. But this attitude is actually detrimental to spiritual realization. And spiritual realization begins by understanding our limitations, that we are deficit, and we want by that makes us humble, right? And humility, by humility we can make spiritual progress. The contemporary ethos again is tries to puff up our ego, right? And that does not actually help with remuneration. Does not help us with spiritual realization. Now, well, somebody might argue that no, we accept authority, right? So I go to work, I have a manager, and then there's an entire hierarchy that goes to director or vice president, CEO. But if we really analyze that argument, the essence of that is that what we are really motivated is by remuneration, right? It's there will be other things that we might appreciate about that person. Maybe that person is a really good manager, or is really good in doing those things, like has a particular skill, and how that individual manages the team, how that individual cares about the team, or how that individual is able to manage the business, and we might appreciate that also, and we want to learn that from them. But why do we want to learn? Again, because we think, okay, by learning I can advance in my career, right? So if you really go like the framework of 5 whys, why, and you try to find that, ultimately you will come to the conclusion, well, it is materially motivated. You're not accepting authority as opposed to individual that goes to Gurukul in a Varnashram, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail later. But the idea is that of a genuine service. It's not materially motivated. Many times what happens is, I work for many different companies, and you see this manager is very nice, and he just wants to take care of you in a lot of different ways. But sometimes you leave the company and you move on, and then if you reach out to that individual, unless you have a really good personal rapport on a basis, and you want, you go and approach him, hey, on LinkedIn, write me a recommendation, or you again, there is an opportunity in that company again, and you want to go back, and sometimes they don't even respond back, right? So the niceties that we see many times in this world, or accepting authority or taking care of the dependents, is all materially motivated. So like in the Varnashram culture, the idea, the relationship between a master and a servant is that the master does not keep a servant to show his superiority, that, hey, I am maintaining you. And he does not uh, reject the servant when the servant is incapable of working, because of being old, or becomes handicapped, continue to maintain all life. And similarly, the servant never gives up the service of one's master in the anticipation, oh, is someone else is going to pay me a better remuneration. And there is no remuneration, but the master always takes care of all the needs of the servant. And so it's a different currency of exchange, and you see there's more commitment to even those kind of relationship. Okay. Otherwise, the thing is, when the things are not, when the economic model is based on just profit, then everyone is dispensable, right? So I'm in travel industry. The industry is not doing great right now. The business is 90% down, and so they decided, well, this role otherwise would have been fine, but this role we don't need it, so they eliminated my role, right? So and then you just let you go. So then you have to find another job in a limited time, especially if you're on a work visa or something. So the whole idea, if in the current society, is it's not motivated by a deep relationship. So the other thing is, authority that we accept is also going back to the relationship between a guru and a disciple. And if you look at the contemporary world, like the knowledge can be acquired today anywhere. You go online, you search, and you can find so many resources. You can learn on your own, or even you go and read any books, tutorials, and that knowledge can be acquired. Or even if you go to school, the idea is that, well, my parents are paying the fees, or I'm paying money for the college. Or if it's public school, well, it's still paid through the taxes. And so the relationship, again, is not very intimate between the guru and the disciple. And the whole idea is, well, it's transactional. You receive knowledge and you move on. And so that is called shiksha. Shiksha is knowledge. But in the Vedic culture, there is the idea of diksha also. And then diksha is also, it's given actually, in some ways, more importance, in the sense that, because diksha means surrendering to a guru, and that surrendering means a significant level of dedication. So traditionally, when the boys, they go to gurukul, and even if that individual might be son of a king, and goes to gurukul and lives very simply, wears very simple clothes, they sleep on the floor. They wake up early in the morning, they wash their own clothes, pots, cook, and before the guru wakes up, you want to make sure all the arrangements are taken care of, and they serve the guru, they feed the guru, and after guru is fed and served nicely, after that only they will honor prasadam. And sometimes the guru forgets to call them, then they would skip the meal. And they would do menial tasks. And there is an example of Krishna and Sudama, and they were living in Sandipani's Muni ashram, and Sandipani Muni sent them to the forest one day to collect firewood, and there was a lot of rain, and the storm came in, and they were not able to return in the night. And they just accepted the situation. They were they climbed up a tree. There was flash floods. And later on in the morning, the guru came looking for them, and they were very happy to find them. And so you see, there's a very disciplined and very strict life, and the idea of being fully surrendered to one's guru. Of course, Sandipani Muni knew that Krishna and Balram, they are not ordinary individuals. They are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when the time came for Guru Dakshina, he requested that, I have been bereft of my parenthood, in the sense that my son had passed away at a young age, and I know you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you desire, you can bring my dead son back to life. And so Krishna goes to Yamraj, and then he retrieves the son of his guru, and then he delivers them. So essentially the point is that the idea of being fully surrendered to one's guru, that kind of training helps one's crush one's ego, right? In the spiritual world, we'll find that the gopis, there's a hierarchy. The gopis are serving in a hierarchy to ultimately to Radha Rani, and the Ast gopis, and Radha Rani is ultimately serving to Krishna. And so unless we have that grit and training to where we sort of crush our ego, and we are fully surrendered to us a bona fide authority, then we really cannot make genuine spiritual progress. So in the terms of Varnas, the hierarchy is that we see is the Brahmanas, they accept poverty. Generally, in the West, they have this idea that they think in terms of caste system, the higher caste Brahmanas exploited the lower classes and things like that. But if you see Varnashram system, the Brahmanas, they voluntarily accept poverty so that there is no conflict of interest, and they can instruct the Kshatriyas. If they are maintained by the Kshatriyas, then they get a salary. Then think, I don't want to say something that might offend them. And so we see example of Sudama. He was extremely poor. Then we had Dronacharya. He was so poor, he could not have enough to give milk to his son Ashwatthama. And so he went to Draupad. Drupad insulted him. So all that. But the idea is the Brahmanas, they voluntarily accept poverty, and so they are higher than the Kshatriyas, but they instruct the Kshatriyas on dharmic governance. And the Vaishyas, they accept the authorities of Kshatriya, and they pay the taxes in terms of grains and other produce. Kshatriyas use that to perform fire sacrifices, to maintain their army, to maintain the populace. And Sudras, they accept the authority of the Vaishyas and engage in their service. And I mentioned that they don't give up master, or the master does not give up servant. So this chit, or the knowledge is that knowledge of our dependence on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, on Paramatma, and not directly, but through a hierarchy of capable, spiritually elevated individuals. So that's how the social structure is there, and it allows us to surrender to someone who is capable, and that is the chit, or the knowledge that, well, I am not alone. It's not just me and the Brahman, but there are other individuals. And then there is this idea of service, and that idea of service is very important. That's part of chit. Is that clear so far on up to this point, before we move on? Anyone has any questions or comments? Okay. So next is Ananda, or bliss, and which is the ultimate objective, right? We are all looking for happiness. So the further engagement, so we discussed, well, we have to be engaged according to our nature, and then we discussed that we need to be further engaged according to our nature in a hierarchical structure where the authorities are bona fide, they are spiritually elevated, and they are deserving. And beyond that, the hierarchy in terms of the Varnas, then there is the idea of gender comes. And so the question is why there is a hierarchy in the gender, and if there is a hierarchy, what is that hierarchy and why it is. So it is important to understand that the hierarchy of gender that we see in this world is modeled after how things are in the spiritual world, and because this material world is a perverted and an inverted reflection of the spiritual world. So for that, I think we will go back to Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, 1st chapter, 5th verse. And in that, let me see, yeah, here it is. So here is the verse. I'll read the Sanskrit. Radha Krishna Pranaya Vikriti Ladini Shaktir Asmad Ekat Manav Api Bhuvi Pura Deha Vedam Gato Tau Chaitanyakhyam Prakritam Adhuna Tadvayam Chaikyam Aptam Radha Bhavadyuti Suvalitam Naumi Krishna Swarupam. He's saying Radha and Krishna Pranaya Vikriti Ladini Shakti. So the Pranaya Vikriti means the loving affairs of Radha and Krishna. They are transcendental, right? And they are transcendental manifestations of Lord's internal pleasure-giving potency. Although Radha and Krishna are one in their identity, this is an important point, they separated themselves. So Radha and Krishna originally were one. Eka Atmano. Originally they were one, and Krishna, in order to experience different kind of ecstatic rasas and emotions, he separated himself into two different forms. And that form is his form of a masculine form as the energetic, and then a feminine form of Radharani, who is the energy of Krishna. Now, if you see Krishna in his pastimes, he performs different kind of activities, which we typically identify to the male gender, right? And then, see Krishna is engaged in, killing so many demons right from his childhood. He kills the, Dhenukasura, Arishtasura, the horse demon, the demon in the form of donkey. Then there is Putana right after he was born. Then there are so many Trinavarta, Satkasura, and so finally goes to Mathura, where he before that he kills Bakasura, the demon in the form of a crane, Agasura, which is a huge python. And you can see that like a hero is a very masculine kind of some of his pastimes, but at the same time is very soft-hearted. Now he goes and kills the powerful Kuvalya Pida elephant. So Kamsa wanted to kill him even before he arrives to the wrestling arena, and then the wrestlers Chanura, Mustika, they're extremely powerful, and finally Kamsa, Krishna is able to kill Kamsa. And so you see a lot of chivalry and valor that he is showing in that form. Then the feminine form of Radharani, even before he leaves Vrindavan, you see there's a very loving pastimes of Krishna and Radha that are entailed. And Krishna and Radha, she, in a typical feminine form, she has a lot of feminine characteristics. And, she's serving Krishna, she's making, different kind of food items. And interestingly, Radharani had got this benediction from Durvasa Muni that the food, whoever eats the food cooked by her, that person would be very healthy, will have a long life. And Mother Yashoda, she wanted obviously the best interest of his child, and so she always, every day, she used to call Radharani to come and cook for Krishna. Radha is already married to her so-called husband Abhimanyu. Now these are all arrangements, because the extramarital conjugal love has its own pleasure, and though Krishna and Radharani are one, by their own potency, they are made to forget they are the supreme personality of Godhead, so that they can enjoy this pastime. Just like when Mother Yashoda is chastising Krishna, Krishna is really scared. He's feeling, he's really crying. He's not faking that he's crying. He's really crying. So he wants to experience all these rasas. And for that purpose, by his own arrangement of his energy, he himself is made to forget. Just like if you go in a prison cell, the jailer might ask the guard outside, say, "I'm going inside the cell, you lock me from outside." Right? So in the cell, both the jailer and the prisoner are locked, and then the jailer might be investigating the prisoner. And so it might appear that the jailer is also being imprisoned, but he went by his own choice. So we should not think that Krishna is put into illusion like we are put into illusion. But anyway, the point I'm saying is that the same Radharani, though she assumes different feminine characteristics, and she is perfectly capable of performing, all the activities of valor that Krishna performed. Who is Durga? Radharani expands into Lakshmi, Lakshmi expands into Durga. So if you see Durga, Mother Nature, in this material world, this Brahma Samhita verse, it says, very nice verse, Srishti सृष्टि स्थिति प्रलय साधना शक्तिर एका छाये यस्य भुवनानि बिभर्ति दुर्गा इच्छानो रूपमपि यस्य च चेष्टसा गोविंदमादि पुरुषं तमहं भजामि. The external potency Maya, who is the nature of the shadow of the Chit potency, is worshipped by all people as Durga. She is creating, preserving, and destroying agency of this mundane world. I adore the primeval Govinda in accordance with whose will Durga conducts herself. So Durga is conducting on the will of the Lord, but she is so powerful. All the hurricanes or the volcanoes or earthquake, you see powerful, energy, right? She could totally do all these activities. Radharani could have totally done every single activity that Krishna performed, right? She could lift Govardhan Hill. She has the energy to do that. She could, kill all the demons. She could fight. She's Sakti, right? We cannot underestimate her. But she does not do it on her original form. She expands into Durga, and that also Durga is acting according to the will of her consort, which is Shiva, right? It's just like Radharani ultimately expands into Durga, Krishna expands through series of expansions into Shiva. So she is also acting under the will of her husband. Now the question is, Krishna, who and Radha, they were one, and then when Krishna decided to, split into two different forms, he had the other options. So one option is what is the reality, where the masculine form, he assumed, and Radharani had assumed a feminine form. The question is then, why didn't Radha perform masculine activities and Krishna perform feminine? And they are perfectly capable of doing it. So why they limited themselves to those gender specific activities? And so the answer to that is that Krishna, he did this arrangement in the sense that to maximize his bliss, in the sense that he, if it was the other way, it would not have been as blissful, where Radha is performing, all the masculine activities and Krishna is performing the feminine activities. And so the bliss could have been maximized, not for his own enjoyment and enjoyment of all his associates, by assuming masculine form and performing masculine activities in that masculine form. And Radha Rani, she assumes feminine form, and then she performs activities which are very gender normative according to her form. So what was the point I was trying to make? Yeah, so in order to lead to the highest bliss, so they assume this form. So at this point I wanted to ask a question. So this is as far as Krishna's pleasure is concerned. He had a very gender normative roles when he expanded, though they are the same individual. Now the question is, even so, we read Krishna's pastimes, right? We read that in Bhagavatam. We read a Krishna book. Now, from our perspective, if we are to read same Krishna book or Srimad Bhagavatam, and in our mind, let's switch the positions. You can imagine everything that Krishna did being performed by Radharani, and then all the activities of Radharani, that she performed, let's assume it's in a masculine form, right, in a male form. And would you feel connected to those pastimes? It's something that, can you relate to it, if it is not gender normative? Is it something that, so Krishna found his bliss. He said, he says for bliss to be maxima, realized in the maximum way, he decided to assume a masculine form. But if it was the other way, if the reality was alternate, even from the perspective of the devotees who are, experiencing and reading and enjoying those pastimes, would they be able to enjoy, right? So if you think that is something that is pleasing, then you can raise your hand. I'll give you a minute to think if you want, but if you have anything to comment over here, you can mention over here what raise, and I'm going to elaborate more on that. There's more to come, but I don't see anyone's hand raised. Is there any other questions, comments at this point in time before we move on? Everyone's following? Okay. So for this purpose, Krishna is the only Purusa. He is the male. We are all actually female or the secondary enjoyers. So in the Purusa literally refers to the one who is the enjoyer, and the others, the Prakriti, is to be enjoyed. So in this material world, we falsely assume male identity in the sense that I might think I'm a male, but in spiritual world, the Gaudiya ideology, we are all females. We are all meant to be enjoyed by the Lord. So in conjugal love, there are only two rasas which is visible. So there is a literature called Nectar of Devotion, which technically analyzes different kind of spiritual feelings. And so there are 5 different kind of rasas. Remember, I mentioned parental affection, conjugal affection, friendship, servitorship, neutral relationships. So this Nectar of Devotion, this is chapter 49. So if later we might study this after Bhagavad Gita, but it's a technical analysis of different symptoms. There are stimulation of ecstatic love, expression of love for Krishna. There are different symptoms. See affection in servitorship, neutral love. Then there's parental affection. There is separation, fraternal affection, right? Then there is emotions of laughter, astonishment, chivalry, compassion, anger. This is all in the service of Krishna. Now then there is a technical analysis of mixing of rasas, and then there is the idea of which rasas are compatible. Just like when we cook food, if you cannot mix any kind of random flavors, there could be contrasting flavors, but then certain contrasting flavors are compatible. The other contrasting flavors, they are not compatible. So the analysis of all that is very important. So it's present in this literature. So in this, you find that in the 49th chapter, it says that the conjugal love in the conjugal love, there are only 2 kind of rasas which are compatible, which is, it's called the yuddha-vira and dharma-vira. So here, according to expert opinions, in ecstatic conjugal love, the feeling of chivalry known as yuddha-vir and dharma-vir are only compatible additions. So what does this mean, yuddha-vir and dharma-vir? So in the dharma-vir means that the feminine energy, so Radha Rani or any gopis, they could have 2 kind of reactions. So Krishna, in his masculine form, he is, you can say, he's assuming a higher authority, but that is very nominal, because actually if you see the Gaudiya philosophy, we understand that Radharani is supreme. Krishna is fully under the control of Radharani. And anyone in conjugal affection to Krishna is in 2 rasas, dharma-vir and yuddha-vir. So dharma-vir means conforming, right? So if the husband or the lover, whatever that person is saying, one conforms to it, that is dharma-vir. And yuddha-vir means you challenge, and both are valid, both are compatible. So if you see the queens of Dwarka, they were in this dharma-vir rasa. They are very obedient, very conforming to what Krishna used to say, and mostly, I mean, there are we see in our own married life, sometimes there is a argument, or wife might not be willing to listen, or and that one has to accept. And these are all rasas. There is no, and this is all actually makes our life very interesting and pleasing. The love is deep. The essence of everything is still love, and there might be conforming or non-conforming. But when we talk about gopis, the gopis, they are not wedded to Krishna, but they have a conjugal relationship with Krishna, and that is more pleasing in a way to Krishna, right? Even within, and more pleasing because it's kind of different kind of excitement. Just like with something that is forbidden, I can go to Costco, get mango and eat it. That's one thing. But I remember, as growing up in India, if you go to a farm and you get on a tree and you pluck the mangoes on your own and you eat it, it's a different flavor. And sometimes you go to a neighbor's farm, it's not my uncle's farm, my maternal uncle, and that maternal side, they had farms in South Gujarat. But if you go to a neighbor's farm, you don't own that farm, you're kind of stealing it. And so that has its own pleasure. So similarly, Krishna is enjoying. Of course, Krishna is the husband of everyone. For him, he's the master of everyone. There is no stealing for him. But just for all those rasas to manifest, he experiences conjugal love outside of wedlock, and there is nothing immoral for him, and he's not driven by lust. This is between him, is a special relationship between him and his devotees. But within the gopis, there are two camps. One is Chandravali. Chandravali is the chief of right-wing gopis, and Radharani is the chief of left-wing gopis. So the idea of right and left, we talk about in political terminology, but where is it coming from? Again, it's coming from Krishna. So the right-wing gopis, they said, well, you have to follow according to rules and regulation. The rules and regulation is that, well, Krishna is our master and the husband, and we love him. We cannot challenge him. And so they are always, sometimes Krishna, keeps the gopis waiting for a long time, or he does something that Chandravali does not like, and she might be feeling angry. But as soon as Krishna comes, she does not express her anger, and she's always conforming, and she becomes very, polite and gentle, and she is able to, and Krishna likes, Krishna is very pleased by her. Radharani, on the hand, she is the left-wing gopi. She does not conform to any norms. He said, what do you mean, I have to listen to Krishna? I don't listen to Krishna. She challenges him, right? That she's yuddha-vira. That's the rasa. And in that rasa, Krishna actually likes more. So of all the gopis, between dharma-vira and yuddha-vira, Krishna is pleased by the gopis that challenge him. That is the rasa that Krishna enjoys more. So that's why Radharani is even more pleasing to Krishna than Chandravali. So this Srimati Radharani, or Hara, sees the energy of Hari, and her external form is Durga. So we talked about it, right? She manifests her majestic power. So she is still controlling Krishna. In either way, Krishna is controlled. Krishna is controlled both by Chandravali and by Radharani. Chandravali controls Krishna by her pleasing attitude. She is very conforming, and Krishna is melted. And same thing by, in similar way, Radharani, when she challenges Krishna is overpowered by her. And also, see, when she is challenging Krishna, she is not challenging in a mean way. She has a lot of deep love for Krishna. And so she, Krishna actually likes Radharani in a way more. So Radharani is considered the epitome of the highest bliss that Krishna gets from. So but her challenge, despite of she challenging her engagement is very conforming to the gender normative roles. That means she is not trying to take up activities which are typically, hey, Krishna, I'm challenging you in the sense that, okay, I'm going to do the things that you are doing. I'm going to go and take care of the cows tomorrow. I'm going to start grazing the cows, or I'm going to show that I can also kill the demons. So she's completely able to do it. And so it's not about what she's capable of doing. It's more about what actually enhances the bliss both for her and both for Krishna. And so that is the essence. And based on that, she manifests dharma-vira rasa and the yuddha-vira, and yuddha-vira rasa, and Chandravali manifests dharma-vira rasa. They all conform to gender normative roles. So yes, the Gaudiyas, that's why the Gaudiyas represent highest form of spiritual feminism. So the worshippers, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, their whole dedication is to Radharani. And the only reason they have any relationship with Krishna is because Radharani loves Krishna. Otherwise, we have nothing to do with Krishna. And so in that sense, the Gaudiyas, they represent the highest form of spiritual feminism. Now, what we see in the spiritual world, there's a question, Suma.
Yes, thank you. So you mentioned about the masculine roles, feminine roles. Can you classify or define that? Or is there any references to say that these are masculine roles and these are feminine roles as well?
Yeah, it's further down the line. It's there. We'll get to that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Okay. So the absolute truth entails gender normative feminism. And what I mean by gender normative is, well, there is feminism is there, but that feminism does not transcend or does not transgress, not transcend, does not transgress the gender normative engagements. And there is an interesting research that's done. I'm going to have to go back to my here. And this is a paper published by Linda Elizabeth Chardon, The Personal, Political, and Virtual Redefining Female Success and Empowerment in a Post-Feminist Landscape. And it's a long research, it's almost 40 pages, and it talks about history of feminism across last 200 years, but I'm not so much concerned about that. I think she makes an important point over here, is that I'm trying to find the exact quote. It's right in the beginning. Yeah, I think this is it. Since the dawn of feminism, there has been a fight for women's rights and equal opportunities for women in men's world. Today, we define feminine success in terms of masculine models. We frame our feminist triumphs in the language of patriarchy of society. Popular culture and values have perpetuated these beliefs and reinforced these standards in all aspects of women's life, where we should be searching to discover what defines both professional and relational equality for women. We have, as an alternate, borrowed the organizing structure of male hierarchies and applied these systems to females. A woman must be successful as a man would be in regards to career. Women must, there's further, the essence of what it's saying is that if you look at the history, and there are reasons where unqualified men did abuse, and that led to this whole idea of rising up to those mistreatments, if you will. But the model that was pursued over here, she's mentioning, is that we try to define the success of feminism in terms of masculine models. What it means is that, well, the whole idea being that if men are able to do it, we can prove that we can also do it, right? And that she's saying is wrong, because that itself, she's saying that, well, the standard has already been set by men, and now we are trying to achieve that, we are trying to close that gap. So that actually supports patriarchy, she's saying. So the feminine success should not be defined in terms of what the males have defined the parameters of success as, whether you talk about ability to earn, or position at work, or things like that. He says, well, the whole idea of catching up to a standard which has been established by men, that itself is against the whole idea of feminism, in the sense that it's actually reinforcing the idea of patriarchy, and that's the essence of what she's trying to say over here. And so I just wanted to bring that up. And there are a lot of thinkers in this particular space, and they're thinking that, well, the idea of feminine success should be defined in their own terms, instead of trying to emulate, or to make it very clear. It could be something like, well, the real success, well, in one sense, it's not what she's necessarily saying, but if there was some standard of achievement where you say, which is typically assigned to women, that they are able to do it, and if men are trying to pursue that same kind of success or achievement, well, like, women are able to do it, let me prove that I can also do it, right? So, but that's not the current norm. That's not that the man, the standard is set by women and the men are trying to catch up with that, right? It's the other way, where the standard is sort of has been set by men, and women are trying to catch up. They say this actually defeats the purpose of feminism, and that's what she's trying to say over here. And I just wanted to bring that up, because if you see, the whole Vedic culture, the idea of feminism is there, but it's still within the gender normative forms. And if you see any in our Vedic culture, in our own experiences that we see, generally, in a relationship between a husband and wife, and wife sometimes, she's very cordial, she's always helping, but sometimes she has freely expresses her opinion, or she does not always conform. So that yuddha-vira and dharma-vira rasa, they are there. And but if you look in the traditional society, that doesn't mean that the women have necessarily given up their gender normative roles, and have taken up roles which have been typically ascribed to men. And now we are still talking about the pristine Vedic culture, how it translates to current context. That's a separate discussion. I don't think we'll get to it today, but we'll definitely continue in the next class. So the point I'm trying to say is, to give you an example, sometimes what happens is the wife, either by her pleasing attitude, and sometimes it's not, I'm not trying to put them in buckets, both the rasas are present, and in the sense that the wife might be serving the husband, or is very pleasing to the husband, and the husband is melted by that, and he actually agrees to whatever the wife is saying. And sometimes the wife is in a yuddha-vira rasa, and that also ideally the husband, in the Vedic culture, he accepts it, and it's just part of a relation. It's mutual rasas, just like Krishna and Radharani are experiencing. So it's reflected over here. But when it comes to, sometimes say the guests are coming, right? And sometimes the husband is not, might not be even very well versed in dharma, or even worldly dealings. What does the wife do? The wife up manages the husband. He says, okay, this is coming, make sure this is how you deal with, maybe there is a, they're trying to buy something, and the wife knows that these are the limitations of the husband, and so she tries to guide him and correct him and up manage him. So just like in at work, if we find that our manager is not a good manager, is not so much capable, but their reports, what they do is they try to up manage him and help him perform that role. They don't take up his role. And then despite of whatever that goes within the household, when they say some guests are coming, or somebody, other family members are coming, the wife, she always takes in a role where she's always like a subordinate role, and the husband goes ahead and takes the charge, though the wife actually prepared the husband. She sort of up managed the husband, and made him ready to deal with the situation. But the official transaction, whether it's purchasing something or buying something, it's the male actually does it. And there's further discussion on it, why it is like that, and I'm going to dive into that, but I just wanted to give that context. And so the idea is that the roles are within that gender normative forms, and those are not transgressed. And so why is that? And so we're going to talk about that right now. I just want to see if I miss something over here. No. Okay, so it's already 6:26. I don't plan to cover the whole thing, but if everyone is willing to be here for another 10 minutes, I wanted to cover the topic of viva, what marriage actually means in the Vedic context, and it might take another 10 minutes. But again, if anyone wants to leave, then we'll stop the class and we'll continue next time. But is everyone able to stay a little bit longer? Or somebody needs to leave?
I need to leave.
Okay, so I think, how about this? Let's take a break over here, and then we'll continue. I think it's okay. We'll spend one more session. I think next session we'll definitely cover it. I think this is, now we are actually going into what actually viva means, and what is the etymological understanding of it. How the understanding of viva is different from marriage, is how we understand in secular terms. And then we'll go into different gradations, and then going back to that idea of modeling, right? I talked about the social structures. There are certain attributes that can be modeled, other attributes cannot be modeled. And then as a question was, what are those, gender normative duties, and why are they assigned in that way? And so all those, I think we should be able to easily cover this in the next class. And let's just take a break. See, it's almost over. There was the last sentence, but it's better that we start this discussion. I mean, I know this is the crux of the discussion, and I'm not able to get to it, but I think it was very important to present the background until we arise to that point. So how about that? Let's take a break, and then we'll continue next time. Sounds good?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you.